baby Moses. Exodus 2:3. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile.
Many years later, after Joseph and all his brothers had died, Pharaoh was the new king of Egypt. He feared the children of Jacob, now called the Israelites.
The Israelites are growing too strong. If there is a war, they may fight against us and defeat us.
To keep this from happening, he made the Israelites into slaves and put Egyptian masters over them. They were forced to work very hard, making bricks and mortar. Pharaoh used the bricks to build great cities, but no matter how unkind the Egyptian slave masters were, or how hard their work became, the Israelites continued to grow in number. Pharaoh became so angry, he passed a cruel law ordering every baby boy born to an Israelite family to be drowned in the Nile River. Now it happened that a baby boy was born to an Israelite family. Fearing Pharaoh's decree, the mother hid the baby for months. But when he began to cry and move about, she had to do something to save him. She decided to make a large basket out of the reeds that grew near the river. She sealed it with sticky tar so it would float. Then she put the baby in the basket and set it among the reeds along the riverbank. His sister Miriam stood at a distance to watch over the baby. That evening, Pharaoh's daughter went down to the river to bathe. It was then she noticed the strange basket floating among the reeds.
"Fetch that basket,"
she said to her servant girl. When she opened the basket and saw the little baby boy, she loved him. Then Miriam came forth and said,
"Would you like for me to get an Israelite woman to take care of the baby?"
"Yes, I would,"
said the princess. So Miriam ran back to get her mother and told her the things that had happened.
"Take care of this baby and bring him back to me when he is older,"
the princess said. When the child grew older, his mother took him to Pharaoh's palace, back to the princess, and he became her son. The princess named him Moses, saying,
"I drew him out of the water."
Esau and Jacob, the trouble with twins. Genesis 25:24. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb.
Now Isaac loved the Lord and grew to be a great man of God. At age 40, he married a woman named Rebekah. Like Abraham and Sarah, they prayed that God would bless them with a child. When Isaac was 60 years old, the Lord answered their prayers with a double blessing. Rebekah was going to have twins. Even before the babies were born, Rebekah felt them kicking and fighting each other.
Why is this happening?
The Lord answered and said,
"Two nations are inside of you, and the two will be separated. One will be stronger than the other. The older brother will serve the younger."
On the day of their birth, Esau, the firstborn, was red and hairy. Jacob was fair and smooth and followed with his hand grasping Esau's heel. Just as Rebekah had been told, the two boys were very different. Esau grew up to be a very skillful hunter, while Jacob liked to stay close to home. One day, Esau came home weary and tired from a long day's hunt. Jacob had just finished cooking some tasty stew. Esau was very hungry when he said,
"Jacob, let me have some of your stew."
"First, sell me your birthright."
This meant that Jacob, the second-born, would have all the special honors given to the firstborn. Again, Jacob said,
"Give me your birthright, and I will give you food."
Esau, being so tired and with the smell of Jacob's stew tempting him, replied,
"I'm about to die anyway. What good is a birthright if you're dead of hunger? You can have it. Now give me some stew."
"Swear to me first."
So Esau swore before the Lord and gave Jacob his birthright. How foolish he was to sell his birthright for so little. Many years passed, and their father Isaac became very old and blind. Fearing he might die soon, he called for Esau and said,
Take your bow and arrow to the country, and bring back some wild game. Prepare a meal just the way I like it, and bring it to me. Then I will give you my blessing."
When Rebekah heard what Isaac had said to Esau, she called for Jacob. She told Jacob she had a plan to trick Isaac, so that he would be the one to take the food to Isaac and receive the blessing. Jacob was concerned Isaac would know. He said to his mother,
"Esau is hairy, and I am not. What if Father touches me and finds out I am not Esau? What if he curses me instead of blesses me?"
The curse will be upon me. Now do as I tell you.
Then Jacob, dressed in Esau's clothes, and with his hands covered with goatskins, took the meal into his father's room.
"The Lord God has given me a successful hunt. Rise and eat, and give me your blessing."
Come close, so I may touch you, to know if you are really Esau.
When Isaac touched the hairy goatskin hands and smelled Esau's clothes, he blessed him, saying,
May all people bless and serve you. May nations bow down to you.
Now Jacob had taken Esau's birthright and blessing. Just as Jacob left his father's room, in came Esau with the tasty meal he had prepared for his father.
"Rise and eat, and give me your blessing."
Who are you?
"I am your firstborn son, Esau."
Isaac trembled.
Who was it then that brought me food and received my blessing? For he will be blessed indeed.
When Esau heard his father's words, he cried,
"Bless me too, Father! Bless me too!"
Isaac raised his head and said,
Your brother has deceived me. He has taken your blessing, and I have made him lord over you and all his relatives. I can give you nothing.
Esau hated Jacob and said to all,
"The day is coming when I will kill Jacob."
No good it ever brings. And Jesus said a lot about our bicker.
Joseph, God put a dream in my heart. Genesis 37:5. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him. Some years later, Jacob married and had 12 sons. He settled in a place called Canaan land, where his sons tended flocks of sheep. Now Jacob had a favorite son named Joseph, who was born when Jacob was very old. To show his great love, Jacob made Joseph a coat of many colors. Many times Joseph would come to his father and tell him the bad things his brothers were doing. This made his brothers very angry and jealous. Joseph's brothers hated him for this and could not speak a kind word to him. One night the Lord sent Joseph a very special dream. The next morning, Joseph told his brothers all about it. He said,
"We were in the fields tying bundles of grain together, when suddenly my bundle rose up and stood tall while your bundles gathered around mine and bowed down to it."
"Do you think you will someday rule over us?"
And they hated him even more. Then Joseph had a second dream. He said to his brothers,
"This time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me."
When he told the dream to his father, Jacob was very unhappy.
Do you believe that your mother and I and your 11 brothers will bow down before you?
One day Jacob said to Joseph,
"Your brothers are tending to our flocks near Shechem. Go to them and make sure all is well."
Joseph obeyed his father and soon found his brothers on a hillside. But his brothers had seen Joseph's coat of many colors from a distance, and before Joseph reached them, they plotted to kill him.
"Here comes the dreamer.
Let's kill him and throw him into one of these empty water holes and say a wild animal attacked and killed him. That will put an end to his dreams."
When the oldest brother, Reuben, heard their plan, he stopped it.
"Do not kill him. Throw him into the pit, but do not harm him."
When Joseph saw his brothers, he ran to them. Suddenly, to his surprise, they all jumped on him and began tearing his coat of many colors from his back. They tied him up and threw him into an empty water hole. As they sat to eat, a caravan bound for Egypt passed by. Judah spoke,
"Why don't we sell Joseph to these merchants? Then we'll be rid of him forever."
Joseph was sold as a slave to the merchants for 20 pieces of silver. When Reuben found out what they had done, he said,
"How can we face our father having done this?"
They decided to kill a young goat and dip Joseph's coat in the blood. They took the coat to their father and said,
"Father, we found this coat on our journey back home. Is it Joseph's?"
Jacob knew it was Joseph's coat and cried out,
"It's Joseph's coat! Some wild animal has killed my son! He must have been torn to pieces!"
Then Jacob tore his clothes and wept bitterly. No one was able to comfort him. Meanwhile, Joseph was on his way to Egypt.
Many colors.
Joseph, from prison to a palace. Genesis 41:41. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. When the merchant caravan reached Egypt, Joseph was sold to an Egyptian named Potiphar, who worked for the king as captain of the guard. Being an honorable man, Joseph soon became Potiphar's most trusted servant. Joseph even lived in Potiphar's house and was put in charge of all he owned. Potiphar's wife became angry with Joseph because he would not disobey the law of the Lord. She said things about Joseph that were not true. Because of her lies, Potiphar had Joseph put in prison. Some time later, the king's baker and servant were also put into the same prison. Joseph took care of them. While they were there, each one had a dream, which troubled them greatly. Joseph noticed their sad faces and asked,
Why are you so sad?
Last night, we both had the strangest dreams, and we don't know what they mean.
God knows everything. With His help, perhaps I can explain the dreams to you.
The king's servant spoke first.
I saw a vine with 3 branches, which budded and blossomed into ripe grapes. The king's cup was in my hand, so I squeezed the grapes into the cup and put the cup into the king's hand.
Then Joseph explained,
The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, the king will call for you, and you will once again be his chief servant. When this happens, please mention me to the king and get me out of this prison, for I have done nothing wrong.
The chief baker spoke up.
In my dream, on my head were 3 wicker baskets. The top basket was full of bread for the king, but the birds were pecking the bread to pieces.
The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, the king will have your head cut off and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh.
Everything happened the way Joseph said it would. The servant was freed, but the baker was killed. 2 years passed, and the king had a troubling dream. He called the wisest men of Egypt to explain it, but they could not. Then the king's servant remembered Joseph, and how Joseph had explained his dream while he was in prison. He spoke to the king.
There was a Hebrew slave named Joseph I met in prison who once explained the meaning of my dreams to me. All that he said came to pass. Perhaps he will know the meaning of your dream.
The king sent for Joseph and said to him,
I am told that you can explain the meaning of my dreams. Is this true?
Joseph answered,
I cannot, but my God can. He will give you the meaning of your dreams.
The king told Joseph of his dream.
I was standing by the Nile River when I saw 7 fat cows come out of the water. Then 7 skinny cows came out of the water. Then the skinny cows ate up the fat cows. But no one could tell they had eaten. Then I woke up. Later, I had a second dream where I saw 7 ripe and healthy heads of grain growing on a single stalk. There sprang up 7 more heads of grain, but these were withered and thin. Then the 7 thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy heads. Is your God able to tell me the meaning of these dreams?
Joseph answered,
God has indeed made known to you what he is about to do. The dreams are one and the same. The 7 fat cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain are 7 years. the 7 skinny cows, and the 7 withered heads of grain are also 7 years. God has twice shown you that there will be 7 years of plentiful food, followed by 7 years of famine and starvation. You should put a wise man in charge of saving up a part of the harvest in the good years to be eaten in the bad years.
The king thought Joseph's idea was very good, so he made Joseph second in command over Egypt to carry out the task of storing food for the coming famine.
When trouble comes, you can roll to him. Your busted bubble comes, roll to him. When bad news breaks, you can roll to him. He is your closest friend. Oh, the Lord is my rock, I will roll to him. Time and again he has helped me through. Oh, the Lord is my rock, on whom I depend. He's the rock you can roll to him. Oh, the Lord is my rock, I will roll to him. Time and again he has helped me through. Oh, the Lord is my rock, on whom I depend. He's the rock you can roll to him. He's the rock you can roll to him. He's the rock you can roll to him.
David and Goliath. 1 Samuel 16:7. For man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Samuel was the last judge to rule Israel. The people of Israel decided they wanted a king, so Samuel chose Saul. Saul became the first king of Israel. Israel met the Philistine army on the battlefield. The Israelites made camp on one hill, and the Philistines camped on another, with a wide valley between them. Now the Philistines had a champion warrior named Goliath. Goliath stood over 9 feet tall and carried a heavy javelin and spear. His armor was made of bronze and glistened in the sunlight. Each morning for 40 days, the giant Goliath came forward and shouted like thunder.
We don't need to have a war today. Send out one man to fight me. If your man defeats me, all the Philistines will be your slaves. But if I win, you will serve us.
King Saul and all the Israelites were terrified. Who could defeat such a giant? One morning, Jesse, son of Obed, sent his youngest son David to the battlefield to deliver a meal to David's older brothers, who were soldiers. When David arrived and heard Goliath mocking the Lord's army, he said to Saul,
Do not fear this Philistine. I will go and fight him.
You? Fight the giant? Why, you're only a boy. He is a mighty warrior, a killer. You are a shepherd boy. You cannot fight him.
Then David answered,
As I kept my father's sheep, I once fought a lion and rescued the sheep. When the lion turned on me, I killed it. Later, when a bear came to take away the sheep, I killed the bear. This giant will be defeated just like them. For the Lord who delivered me from the lion and the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine.
Go, and the Lord be with you.
David put on Saul's armor, but he was not used to it.
I cannot wear this armor,
David said. So he gathered his staff, 5 stones, and his slingshot, and started walking directly towards Goliath. When Goliath saw that Israel had sent a young boy to fight him, he grew angry.
Am I a dog that you come at me with a stick? Come here, and I'll tear you apart. A boy.
Then David spoke.
You come against me with a sword and a spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel's army, whom you mock. This day you will die.
Goliath was furious and moved in to attack. But David took out one of the stones and loaded it into his slingshot. With all the power of the Lord behind him, he let it go. Bang! It struck Goliath right in the forehead and sank deep. Goliath staggered, his knees buckled, and he fell like a giant oak tree. Goliath was not dead, so David ran and stood over Goliath. Taking Goliath's own sword, he killed him. The Lord had given Israel the battle. The Philistine army ran away, but Israel went after them and defeated them. From that day on, David remained in King Saul's service.
Only a boy named David, only a little swing. Only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. Only a boy named David, only a rippling brook. Only a boy named David, but 5 little stones he took. And 1 little stone went into the sling, and the sling went round and round. And 1 little stone went into the sling, and the sling went round and round. And round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And 1 little stone went up in the air. And the giant came tumbling down. Only a boy named David, only a little sling. Only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. Only a boy named David, only a rippling brook. Only a boy named David, but 5 little stones he took. And 1 little stone went into the sling, and the sling went round and round. And 1 little stone went into the sling, and the sling went round and round. And round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And 1 little stone went up in the air. And the giant came tumbling down.
Josiah, a teenager finds a treasure. 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. When Josiah was 8 years old, his father King Amon died, making Josiah king. King Amon had disobeyed the Lord, as did his father King Manasseh. They worshipped idols, but Josiah loved the Lord God and sought to please him in every way. So while he was still very young, he destroyed the idols that were in Judah. Then he sent workers to repair the temple of the Lord. While the workers were cleaning the temple, they found Israel's treasure. There in the dust was the book of the law written by Moses. It had been lost for many years. Shaphan the scribe took the scroll and ran to the palace. There he read the law to young King Josiah. The law warned Israel that if they disobeyed the commandments, God would send great trouble upon them. Josiah asked God for forgiveness for the way his people had sinned. He called all the people of Israel together and read the law and promised to obey it.
And 2 fish. Mark 6:41. And looking up to heaven, he gave thanks. The news of Jesus' miracles began to spread all over the land. People came to Jesus from everywhere, bringing him their hurts and sickness. And Jesus loved them, every one. But now he needed some rest.
Let us go to a quiet place.
So they set sail across the lake. As they sailed away, the people ran around the lake and were waiting for them when they reached the other side. When Jesus saw them, he loved them. They were like sheep without a shepherd. And after all, he was the great shepherd. So once again, he began teaching them and taking care of them. It was late when the disciples said,
Jesus, send the people away so they can eat.
But to their surprise, he said,
You feed them.
Feed them? That would cost too much.
Then Andrew spoke up.
There is a boy here with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. But how far will that go among so many?
Then Jesus said, Tell the people to sit down on the grass. As they were sitting down, Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish and looked up into heaven. He thanked God and then began to break the loaves and fish into pieces. 5,000 people were fed that day, and they all left with their bellies full. The disciples picked up 12 baskets full of bread and fish left behind by the crowd. Jesus has the power to supply all of our needs, no matter what.
Jesus took the 5 little loaves. Then Jesus took the 2 little fish. Then looking up to heaven, he gave thanks, looking up to heaven, he gave thanks. 5,000 were fed with 5 little loaves. 5,000 were fed with 2 little fish. Then looking up to heaven, he gave thanks, looking up to heaven. Jesus took the two little fish. Then looking up to heaven, he gave thanks, he gave thanks. Looking up to heaven, he gave thanks. Jesus took the 5 little loaves. Then Jesus took the 2 little fish. Then looking up to heaven, he gave thanks, he gave thanks. Looking up to heaven, he gave thanks.
The example. 1 Timothy 4:12. Let no one look down on your youthfulness. Show yourself an example. In a letter to his dear friend Timothy, Paul tells him to be about God's work, which is saving lost sinners. We are also to pray for the leaders of our country. Then Paul writes some very important words.
For there is one God and one peacemaker who stands between God and men. That man is Jesus Christ, who gave himself as a payment for our sin. This is the gospel message to young and old. Therefore, let no one look down on you because you are young, but rather set an example for those who believe.
Don't let anyone look down on you. Don't let anyone look down on you. Because you are young. No. Don't let anyone look down on you. Set an example for believers in life. Set an example for believers in love. Set an example for believers in faith. And don't let anyone, no, not anyone, look down on you. Don't let anyone look down on you. Don't let anyone look down on you. Because you are young. No. Don't let anyone look down on you. Set an example for believers in life. Set an example for believers in love. Set an example for believers in faith. And don't let anyone, no, not anyone, look down on you. Don't let anyone look down on you. Don't let anyone look down on you. Because you are young. No. Don't let anyone look down on you. Look down on you. Look down on you. Don't let anyone look down on you.
Never too young. 2 John 1:6. This is love, that we walk in his commandments. In John's second letter, he writes to an unnamed woman and her children. John loved children very much. Just like Jesus, John was so happy to learn these children were walking with Jesus.
Love one another, and this is love, that we walk according to Jesus' commandments.
Each child is very special. Each of you have a very important work to do in God's kingdom. Remember, you are never too young to love one another.
Let 'em, won't you let 'em, let Jesus loved all the little children. Jesus, he loved them everyone. Jesus loved all the little children. He said, let the little children come. Let 'em, won't you let 'em, let the little children come to me. Let 'em, won't you let 'em, let the little children come to me. Let 'em, won't you let 'em, let the little children come to me. Come to me. Let 'em, won't you let 'em, let the little children come to me. Come to me. Let 'em, won't you let 'em, let the little children come to me. Come to me. Let 'em, won't you let 'em, let the little children come to me.
Kind-hearted King. 2 Samuel 22:4. I will call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised. During a fierce battle with the Philistine army, King Saul found his army outnumbered and fled. Saul and his 3 sons, including Jonathan, were all killed that day. David became the new king of Israel. David did not know that Jonathan, his dearest friend, had a 5-year-old son named Mephibosheth. And that day, when a new king came to the throne, he would search for the children of the old king and have them sent away or killed so they could never be king. That is why Mephibosheth's nurse took the boy and fled for safety. In her haste, she stumbled and dropped the little boy, crippling him for life. One day, King David asked if any of Saul's family was alive. He wanted to show them kindness because of his promise to Jonathan. A former servant to Saul, named Ziba, told him Jonathan's crippled son Mephibosheth was indeed alive. David sent for him, and he was brought to the palace. Mephibosheth must have thought David was going to kill him. He fell on his face and cried.
Here is your servant.
But David said,
Don't be afraid. I will give back to you all the land your grandfather Saul owned, and you shall always be welcome at my dinner table.
Because of David's kindness, Mephibosheth became a part of the king's family.
Be kind, every day be kind, in every way be kind to each other and everyone the Lord.